and get started. I love what David Blakely said earlier about power being having this trend of the inversion of power and authority. And I love that because it has so much to do with communications and how we come across. And here's where the inversion comes in, I think, because communicating is a contact sport. You actually have to connect with your listeners in order to make an impact. You have to connect with them. There has to be some sort of connection in that way. The problem is that it's difficult to get. I mean, especially in a digital age these days, it's very difficult. And if we think about the fundamental, the foundation around that connection, what's underneath that? It's about trust. And we can't possibly be granted the power to be up here and be speaking unless we have the trust of our listeners. And this is one person. This is 5 people around a training room. This is a more formal presentation. It doesn't matter what your communication situation is. You have to engender that trust. And our challenge as communicators is to engender trust and believability that our listener has in us. But there's some bad news around this. Francis Fukuyama is a political economist. He wrote a book called Trust. And in it, he cited a longitudinal study. He asked a really simple question of his sample population. He said, do you trust most people? Simple, easy question. He asked it in 1960 first. And in 1960, it was relatively high. Almost 60% of people said, yes, I trust most people. What do you think happened when he asked that question again in 1993? It's got to be down, right? Certainly not up. Yep, it was. It was down to 37%. Now, he hasn't done his study again. We can only wonder where it is now in 2013. But we've got plenty of other barometers around that show us what that is. There's the Element Trust Barometer that says that only 15% of the U.S. population trusts business leaders. 15%. And guess what's lower? The only other institution that's lower. Government. Yes, that's right. Down to 10% he is. But here's where this all comes in, and where we need this. Communicating as a contact sport. We have to connect with our listener. The only way that we can do that is through trust, because it either will grant us the license to operate versus the license to lead. We all have the license to operate. We have jobs. We're employed. We go about operating every day, but do we have the license to lead? And so today is all about how you can use communications and your total communication experience to shift from the license to operate to the license to lead. Granting, how do you get power? How are you given power from your audience, from your listener, from the person across the table, so that you can drive action? So today you're going to learn and become aware of your own communication experience, how you come across, so that you can harness the power of that communication experience and change the way that others think or act. That's the definition of power. We heard that earlier. Your ability to influence, your ability to change. And when we think about that holistically, so we're going to, in a very short amount of time here today, we're going to cover 3 main things. We're going to talk about how you build this trust, how you get that connection as the messenger. So what can you do in your own way about how you go about connecting with people, how you make contact, yourself in your delivery, how you come across. And we'll talk about how you can add trust to the message as well. How do you start thinking through and architecting a message in a way that connects with the listener, that drives that action? You're going to walk away with some really, really specific and practical things that you can do tomorrow, that you can use the very next day. So let's break down the communication experience here. In an in-person, face-to-face communication experience, you've got these 3 aspects. You have verbal. Verbal is the content of the message itself. Those are the words that you're saying. You have the vocal, that's the sound, the tone, the pitch, projection of your voice, what people hear. And then finally you have the visual, and that's what people see of you and your connection with them. Now, if you were to rate, go ahead and just think here, what you think counts in communicating. And if you were to go about weighting these in order of importance, which is more heavily weighted than the other? If you think they're all equal, 33 1/3 all the way down. If you think one is more heavily weighted than the other, just kind of get that in your head. I'm going to ask some questions. How many people think verbal is most or equal importance? Show of hands. Verbal, most or equal? Vocal, most or equal? Sound, tone, pitch, projection of your voice? Okay, 10%-ish. Visual, most or equal? Okay, group. Now before I show you the answer, I do have the right answer for this. I wouldn't set it up if I didn't, but Before I show you this answer, I want everybody to do a quick exercise with me. Make an okay sign with your right hand. Everybody do this. Hold out in front of you. Hold above your head. Hold out to the side. Put it on your chin. Put it on your chin. Put it on your chin. Yes. People are like, yep, I'm there. It's on my chin. Can we get on with it already? What's most important here? The visual to the tune of these numbers here. There's a classic study done by Professor Albert Mehrabian out of UCLA. He wrote a book called Silent Messages, and these numbers reflect that. Now, that's pretty amazing, and it has a really incredibly profound impact on the way that we communicate. Now, let me first begin by telling you what this does not mean, because this is probably one of the most misinterpreted pieces of research on communications out there. They say, oh, well, only 7%. It's all style and no substance. Well, that's not it at all. It doesn't mean only 7% accounts for the content of your message. What it does mean is that when you have an inconsistent message, that is, when the words that you're saying don't match how you come across as you say them, what people see, what they hear, the visual cues dominate. The vocal cues dominate. So I said chin, but you saw cheek. It's an inconsistent message. You default to the visual message. And where does this happen? In our everyday lives. All the time. You know, because I might be on a conference call and I'm really excited or I'm at a meeting and I'm excited to tell you that I think the research that we've done recently is very powerful, and that we have to make this change. It's very important to our organization. We're taught that if we say the words, people are going to get it. But that message comes through us. If I asked you where you spent your time as you're preparing for a meeting, as you're preparing for a conference call, as you're preparing for a presentation, where do you spend your time? What, 99.99% on the content. We're taught that if we say the words, they're going to get it. That message comes through us. And it's why we've got the notion that people buy on emotion and they justify with fact. People buy on emotion, justify with fact. So they're buying off on you. We can't forget that part. They're buying off on you, not just about the words that you're saying. This is true in venture capital around here all over. You might have a really great businessman. Do I believe in the people that are going to lead this company? Do I believe in the founder? Do they have the confidence? Are they projecting this? And so having that consistent message is paramount to your communication experience. So let's go ahead and break that down. It makes a really great case for starting with building trust in the messenger. There's a little person in the middle you can't see right there. But this is, again, for any communication situation you're in, please feel free to come on in and sit down. Grab a seat. So it could be a one-on-one with a team member. You could be in a small team meeting. It could be a large, more formal presentation. It doesn't matter what the situation is. We start with those behavioral skills, with the skills on how you come across for this very reason. So we have what we call at Decker the behavioral big six. These are the things that you think about when you think about delivering a message. So today, we're not going to go into every single one of these, but I want you to start thinking about your habits. What are your habits in each of these areas? And here's the problem with habits. You probably don't even know what you are doing in some of these areas. And so we do, in our coaching, we do a lot of video feedback that show people very plain and simple some of those habits that might be detracting from their communication experience. I'm just going to take one here today, and I'll show you a clip, an example of sort of all of them coming together. But first is connection, and that's eye communication. So how do you achieve that connection with your listener? You do it through eye communication. Your job is to involve them with what you're saying. You want to connect with people. You want to influence them. Eye communication can either make or break that happening right out of the gate. So let's do a quick exercise here. I want you to feel how important, or remind yourselves how important eye communication is. Pair up with somebody right next to you. Anybody, just pair up. One person be A and one person be B. Ready? Come along, you can be A. All right. A, you're just going to tell B about your morning. What time did the alarm go off? Did you have trouble getting the kids to school? Did you hit traffic probably on the way here? What happened? You're just going to tell them about it. And B is going to sit there like a good listener, looking at A, yes, nodding, doing all the right things. About halfway through, I'm going to say, B, look away. B, your job is to look anywhere but at A while they continue talking to you. And then we'll switch and see what happens. All right, A's, go. Let's take it in a couple different directions. How did it feel to be the person speaking and suddenly have your listener not there?
Lose track.
Weird, lost track. How many people lost track? How many people lost your train of thought? Like, we were here and now there's nothing. Okay, well, and by the way, some people, we have had situations where spouses have been in here together. This is so easy for me because I never do it anyway. Normal. It's totally normal, right? Okay, so you got distracted. How did it feel to be the person listening and have to move away? Uncomfortable? You had to make yourself do it because it's so not natural. Anybody feel rude? Yeah. She's making you do this. I'm not really this rude, I promise. Now, the most important question, of course, is how often does this happen every day? And in what situation? All the time, taking notes? Yep.
Conference call.
What's that?
Texters.
Texters. Yeah, okay. Or, so you've got either the BlackBerry or nobody has BlackBerries anymore. What am I saying? You've got your Android device or your iOS operating system. Okay, so you're looking at that, and come on. I'm with you. Go ahead. Or you're in your office, you're in your cube, your workstation, whatever, and here you are, you're on your laptop. Somebody comes in, they need to talk to you. Yeah, go ahead. I'm just finishing up this email. Go for it. I got it. When you don't have eye communication in that in-person experience, you flat out don't have communication. And it happens to us all the time, and all it is a habit. So eye communication, like all of these other things, it's just starting to become aware of what your habits are. Chances are you don't even know it. You don't even know how often you're glancing down. My son caught me the other day, and he said, "Why are you always texting?" I've turned into that person. So we always have these habits, and how do we start tweaking and how do we start shifting those to create an experience? Because when you can start shifting and changing your behaviors, all of a sudden you can create a radically different communication experience. So whether it has to do with connecting with your audience, and oftentimes the tough part once you've got that connection is to keep it. And you do that through skills around energy, and then finally adding some credibility to your message. When you can start tweaking these, becoming aware of what your current communication experience is, shifting that, here's how it can change. Got a video clip here of a guy named Hans Rosling. He's giving a presentation at a TED conference. Hans Rosling is a medical doctor. He's a consultant to the World Health Organization, and he's also a statistician. Does that sound like a nightmare of a presentation coming your way? Right? And he is, not as if that's not bad enough, he's giving a presentation here on fertility rates around the world for the last 40 years. Awesome, right? Settle in, strap on your seatbelt. This is chart after chart after chart. Here's what he did to change his communication experience. Take a look.
I put fertility rate here, number of children per woman, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to about 8 children per woman. We have very good data since 1960 about, on the size of families in all countries. The error margin is narrow. Here I put life expectancy at birth, from 30 years in some countries up to about 70 years. And 1962, there was really a group of countries here that was industrialized countries, and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families and they had relatively short lives. Now, what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change. Are the students right? It's still two types of countries? Or have these developing countries got smaller families and they live here? Or have they got longer lives and live up there? Let's see. We stop the world. And this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see there? It's China. They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but longer life, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here, they still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there, but not Bangladesh. It's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world.
He used behavior to change his communication experience. As a result, he's got the connection that you need, he's making contact that you need, and he's got some really cool software that makes it all happen. But that could have been a nightmare of a presentation. What's your default? Where do you default? Well, I've got the charts. I copy and pasted my Excel chart into PowerPoint. It works out really well, super easy to put in. That's my default. How do you start shifting and changing the experience? By the way, I wouldn't recommend that anybody talks to the screen like this. Please don't do that. It worked for him, but I don't recommend that here. But he's using all the skills around energy to keep people's attention, to bring them in. So that's behavior in a nutshell. But that's only one side of the communication experience, is how you come across, but it's not all style. It's not style without substance. You have to have that substance there. So people are buying off on you, but they're justifying with the facts. So how do you now connect them? How do you start architecting your message in a way that really connects with them? Well, we start to talk about trust in the message. I'm going to give you 4 rules. I'm going to give you a quick little framework to use here. And it has these 4 components. We call these our cornerstones. It's a simple structure that you can use to prep for an email, a conference call. You can use this for a voicemail presentation. This is the framework of your message. So we have here the listener's point of view, action, step, benefits. Rule number 1 of this entire framework: make it about them. Okay, that's not rocket science. Messaging 101 says, oh, if you're going to develop a message, it should be geared toward a specific audience. Everyone knows that. But this cosmic thing happens when we open up our mouths and we begin speaking. Because as we're trying to influence, as we're trying to gain power in a situation, we're trying to influence someone to change the way they think or act about something, we have to prove ourselves. And so we put that onus on us to prove ourselves, and as a result, start talking about ourselves, our company, our services, our products. And all of a sudden it becomes a message that's all about me and has nothing to do with my audience. And it doesn't happen intentionally, it just happens because we're trying to prove ourselves. So backing up, making it about them is where you start. You start with the listeners first. The best thing that you can do is ask a couple questions about the listeners. Describe them in 3 ways. Are they skeptical, anxious, time pressured? Are they risk averse? Are they budget conscious? Get 3 adjectives in your mind, and then you can start framing the message around them. Start there. Next, find the lead of your story. Once you know who you're speaking to, and ask, even if you know them really well, step back and ask some questions. What's changed in the last week? What's changed in the last month? What's changed in this particular quarter that might get them changing the way they think or act about the topic I'm bringing to bear? Now we have to find the lead of the story. What's the one thing you want them to walk away with? This is not informational, it's influence. What's the one thing? Challenge yourself to come up with one statement that's all about how you want them to change the way they think or act about a specific topic. It's not your point of view, it's their point of view. And we start that, we go from listeners up to point of view. Let me give you an example. We were coaching a CEO, and he was trying to get final approval from his board on an acquisition. So he goes to the board, he thinks his point of view is, it's a good fit for us. It's a good fit for us. But then I started asking him, okay, is there anything more behind that? What's going to get me to care as a listener? I'm on the board. And so he goes, well, what does the board care about? They care about scale. They care about growth. We have to make this investment in order to grow. So shifting from something that means something to him to something that means something to them. Find the lead of your story. Challenge yourself. One phrase, one statement. That's all you get. Hardest thing to put into one tight box. Make it concrete. Number 3, make it concrete. What do I mean by that? Well, you've considered your listeners. You've got them going in one solid direction. Give them something to do. So here's where the action comes in. Step number 3 here, action is absolutely critical. Even the most seasoned salespeople that we work with let people off the hook too early. What do I have to do? Where do I have to go? Do I have to compare, contrast? Do I have to pilot something? What do I have to do? If I buy off on your point of view as your listener, What's next? Where do I have to go? That's your point of accountability. And it also helps make it so concrete in their mind that it appeals to that logical side. The logical side of our brain is, what do I do next? What's the path to get there? So it appeals to the logic. Then, if we talk about logic, we have to talk about emotion. You've got to make me care about it. As a listener, make them care. I love this saying, logic makes you think and emotion makes you act. So we're getting them moving in the right direction, they're thinking about it, but finally it's that emotional piece that's going to get me to do something. So I can articulate that in a benefit statement, that is relevant to them. So the best way to come up with something really great and meaningful for your audience, go back to how you describe them. If you describe them as risk averse, present them with a benefit that's going to give them peace of mind. If you describe them as budget conscious, present them with a benefit on how they can leverage an existing investment. And to the extent that you can drive that benefit down to the individual level as much as possible, as opposed to more ROI, we've got top line growth. Don't just cop out on those corporate benefits, but get down to the individual level. Maybe it's about making someone a hero in their organization. You are finally going to be able to drive this project to completion when you do this. So 4 things. Where do you go from here? Quick tips. Well, here's where you can start. Don't do this.
Oh, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Telephone.
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm going to cry.
Well, nothing else left to do.
There is. You can take 1 step. That's all you need to do here. So remember that communicating is a contact sport. You've got to connect with your listener. You have a couple ways to do that. You can do that through the behavioral skills, how you come across, how you reach them. And you do that with your message as well. So in the next week, take 1 thing. Here's your action step. 1 thing. Tweak 1 thing. Maybe it's your eye communication. It could be over dinner with your significant other. That's just fine. Practice it anywhere. These communication skills, I love they were talking about the fact that there's not a business self and a personal self. The consistency of your communication experience is going to help you shift from just having a license to operate to a license to lead. Thanks so much. I'll be around if anybody has any questions, but we're going to wrap up here.